108 years ago, on the 19th of February, 1914. The first building was built in 1916 and was the residence of our first mayor, James Austin Bailey. In 1942, 11 years after having finished serving as mayor, James, as he was known to his friends, donated his home to the town. That building on Queen Mary remains our town hall until today. So Jeremy, I'm not making any requests here, but your house would make a great youth center. Not much would need to change, given that it's already full of a bunch of kids. The night we were sworn in, we all went to the town hall. After a celebratory l'chaim, a Dvar Torah, the 80-year-old town hall had a first. We erected the first mezuzah on the mayor's office. I remember that night with a glow of warmth. It might just have been the whiskey, though. That inaugural night, there was a sense of unity, a renewed sense of hope. We were invigorated to lead the town forward. We became Hampstead 2.0. Jeremy, as the 10th mayor of Hampstead, you are the minion mayor. Individually, we all have our strengths, but remain limited. Working together as a minion, we exceed the sum of our parts. I pray that the warmth, camaraderie, and goodwill of that first evening in Town Hall will become a permanent fixture in our council as we continue to write the history of this incredible town we call home. Jeremy, I leave it to you.
Thank you very much, Jack. That was a very warm introduction. And I remember that evening very well. And it is an evening that I will remember and cherish for not just how long my tenure is, but beyond that. I want to thank Rabbi Whitman for doing an incredible job for our community. As soon as the election was over, I never knew Rabbi Whitman before, but he reached out to me and he wanted to meet with me. He was extremely generous and friendly. And I made a suggestion. Why don't we get to know each other better? Why don't we start a weekly Torah class? And he accepted my offer 100%. And over the past few months, I look forward every Thursday morning to this Torah class. He has incredible insight and in-depth knowledge of Torah. I also want to thank Stu Gutman, a very old friend of mine. We first met, Stu. We first met in '99. I was at Herzliya Snowden. He went to Herzliya Saint Laurent, but that summer in grade 9, we went to Israel together, and we definitely bonded. And I want to take this opportunity to wish him the best of luck in his new position as CEO of ICRF. I know he's going to do an incredible job for our community. When he first reached out to me to ask me to do this, I was more than happy to do it. But then I was like, okay, what do you want me to talk about? What is there to say? She's like, everyone's got a story, let's just hear your story. So this was a few months ago. So I was thinking, okay, what's my story? I'm 37 years old. How advanced can my story be? So I put a few things together. I hope it's not too boring for everybody. But I thought I would start the way most Jews that come together, that get to know each other, will play a little bit Jewish geography. So what's unique that I find about my situation is all 4 of my grandparents were born in Canada. I remember growing up, my friends' grandparents were either immigrants or survivors. I never experienced that. I am very proud to say that I am 100% third generation Canadian. Not only am I third generation Canadian, I'm also third generation Hampstead. My grandmother still lives on Glenmore. My grandparents on my mother's side used to live on Netherwood. My grandmother, who lives in Glenmore, she had a very interesting upbringing. Unfortunately, at a very young age, her parents passed away and she was an orphan. She had an aunt named Sophie Rezminski. Sophie Rezminski, maybe some of you know, was married to Abe Bronfman. I'm sure most of you know Abe Bronfman and the Bronfman family. So her Aunt Sophie took her in, and she was like the 6th sister of that Bronfman family home. There was also another very famous Rezminski in Canada. Her aunt, my grandmother's aunt, his name was Louis Rezminski. He was the third governor of the Bank of Canada from 1961 to 1973. He was probably, in fact, the first Jewish governor of the Bank of Canada. And I don't know if there's been another Jewish governor of the Bank of Canada since. One interesting story about Louis Rezminski, maybe some of you know the Rideau Club in Ottawa. So I don't know if it's in existence now, but back in the 1930s to 1970s, 80s, it was a destination where the upper class politicians and the aristocrats would come and converse and discuss and talk about policy and business and make deals and so forth. And when Louis Rezminski was in office, he was not allowed to join the Rideau Club because he was Jewish. So the then Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson, told all the members at the Rideau Club that if you don't let Louis Rezminski into the club, I'm going to leave, and that would be a big thing, that the Prime Minister of Canada would leave a club. So because of that, he was the pioneer to allow Jews into the Rideau Club. My grandmother was married to Irving Levi, my grandfather. He was born in Manitoba. And also what was unique about him was he earned a PhD in chemistry. For a Jew in that era to go to school and earn a doctorate in those days was also highly unusual. So you fast forward, he started a business. Today that business is run by my uncles. On the other side of my family, my mother's side, my grandfather, Sammy Raps, he also had a very interesting life. He was born at the De La Savane Cemetery. Now, it's a pretty crazy place to be born, but his father owned the cemetery. Unfortunately, he didn't own it for too long because he was a bit of a gambler and he gambled it away in a card game. There's two very interesting stories that I'd like to share with you about my grandfather. He was an incredibly special man, and I could talk the whole night about him. But there's two stories that have resonated with me. The first story, just to give you a little bit of background, my grandfather and his family, he had three brothers. He had two brothers. They grew up extremely poor. They grew up in the gutters, as poor as could be. They moved from apartment to apartment because they couldn't pay rent. One day he came to school very late because he was delivering the newspaper for the Montreal Star, which then became the Montreal Gazette. He came to school late, and he was probably in grade 5 or 6, around there. He came to school late, and he had a rope for his belt, and he had holes in his shoes, and he never got along with his teacher. And I'm not condoning this story, but it's a story that I think is important to say. So when he showed up late to school that day, the teacher brought him to the front of the class, made him stand up on a chair or a desk or whatever, and humiliated him and shamed him in front of the entire class. Look at this boy that comes. He can't even put a proper belt around his pants. He can't even wear proper shoes. He never forgot about that. On the last day of school, on his way to school, just further context, my grandfather was an extremely friendly person, and he got along with everybody. He made lots of friends. And on his way to school, he asked the local produce store owner, who he knew very well, for the most rotten tomato that he had. And the store owner's like, I don't have to give you a rotten tomato. I'll give you the best one I have. No, I want the most rotten. And he went to school. It was the last day of school. He waited for his report card, and he said, I'll never forget it. My teacher was wearing a white dress. This is what he's telling me. And I was waiting for this opportunity all year, ever since she embarrassed me. And the moment that he got his report card, he's walking out the door. As he walks out the door, he takes the tomato and he launches it at the teacher all over the white dress, and the red rotten tomato goes all over the dress. And he had a sense of pride for whatever he did. Fast forward, the summer goes by. The next year, he has the same teacher again, and he's nervous that she's going to get in trouble and this and that, and nothing happens. A month goes by, 2 months goes by, and then one day he gets called into the principal's office, and the teacher is sitting there, and he knows what's going to happen. He sits down, and right away the principal starts saying, "The teacher told me what happened, blah blah blah," and then he turns to the teacher and he says, "The principal is telling this to the teacher. You know, I grew up poor also, and I used to deliver newspaper for the Montreal Star, and you should apologize to Sammy for what you did." My grandfather thought that it was going to go the opposite. The point that I learned from that story, not so much to throw a tomato at your teacher, but you should never be ashamed for who you are. You have to take a stance, and maybe that was not the right stance, but you have to take a stance for what you are. And if your motives are pure, ultimately you will prevail. The second story that I want to teach you from my grandfather is when he was about 17, 18, 19, he was out of school by then, and he was already working. And I think he was earning $17 a week in the garment trade or whatever it was. And he comes to his boss one day, and he was a very hard worker. He was a very good worker. And he comes to his boss one day and he says, "Okay, I'm sorry, I'm leaving. I'm going to work for this person." It was his competitor or something. And the boss says to him, "Okay, you know, I'll pay you $19 a week." And he says, "No, I'll pay you $21 a week. No, $23 a week." And he went all the way up to $25 a week. And he said, "Okay, how much are they paying you? I'll match it and I'll pay you more." And he turned to his boss and he says, they're going to be paying me $15 a week, which is $2 a week less than what he's earning with him. But he knew that by going to the new employer, he would learn a tremendous more than what he was doing in his current position, which ultimately allowed him to go on and successfully make a huge business for himself. Anyways, when the boss found out, he kicked him out of his office. But again, the point is, it's incredible that he came from such a poor background and was not immediately drawn to the dollar, earning the dollar. He had the foresight to know what could be beyond that. My grandfather was married to Phyllis Kaplan, Phyllis Raps. She had a more comfortable upbringing. Her parents owned the store, and ultimately, four of them made my parents, Phil and Elaine Levi, and they still live in Hampstead. I'm married to Mandy Cola. We met in Florida about 15 years ago. At the time that we met, she was in a long-term relationship. She was with her high school sweetheart, but I didn't really care. I chased her until she went out with me. And this coming August, we're going to be married 10 years. We have 6 incredible children, 4 boys and 2 girls. We have Jacob, who's 8, Jonah, who's 7, Mila, who's 3, and we have COVID babies, twins, Jordan and Maya. And what's interesting about Jordan and Maya is the entire time my wife was pregnant with twins, no one in our family, or no one, even our friends, knew that that she was pregnant with twins. So it was a double surprise. We kept that. I will share a little bit of a dramatic story that happened with Mila. And at the time, it was not so fun to talk about. But just to give you a background, Mila is our 4th child, and we had our first son Jacob before our first wedding anniversary, about 2 or 3 weeks before our first wedding anniversary. So we had our babies back to back, and thank God all of them were easy pregnancies, and My wife never lost her net. She never broke her water in any of the pregnancies. So it was always done during labor. I think it was winter break, because it was December 27th. One week we were up north of the country, and I was working, so I was commuting back and forth. So, but the rest of my family was up north in the country. And this is about 5 or 6 weeks before the due date for Mila. It's about 8 o'clock at night, I come back. And the night before, I was up all night because one of my kids wasn't feeling well. So I was like up for the past, I don't know, 26 hours. I was totally blown. I come home, I lie down in bed. I think it's 7:30 at night. My wife says to me, and this is in St. Adolphe de Howard, I think my water just broke. So I'm like, we're not sure, because again, this is our 4th child, but we don't know what water breaking feels like and so forth. Anyways, turns out she was right. Water broke, and we had to rush to the hospital from St. Adolphe. So I can't even tell you how quickly I got everything ready into the car. And we had to leave our kids there. Thank God we had nannies there. But I remember driving from the country house until we're about 20 kilometers away from the city. I didn't hear anything. Everything was a very big blur. I could just feel my heart jumping out. Because just to give you some context, a week before, someone in synagogue is telling me a story about how they had to deliver their own child in the bathtub at home. And this is going through my head. And I'm as squeamish as it comes. So I thought this was going to end very badly. But thank God we made it to the hospital. In fact, we were put in the room right next to Carrie Price and his wife. We all gave birth together. Everything was beautiful. At the time, it was a very dramatic story. But nonetheless, it was a story. I went to Solomon Schechter growing up, and then I went to Herzliya for high school. My homeroom was a highly remarkable homeroom. So for those who are not totally familiar, in Herzliya, Snowdon, you have the English section and the French section, and we had 3 classes per grade. You have two were French section, 1 was English section. I was in the English section, and in grade 10, we ranked number 1 out of the entire province in Quebec for our matriculations. That was an incredible achievement. And looking back, I see where all of us have come from that class. Everyone has become either a lawyer or a doctor, an accountant. Like this was a highly unusual but remarkable group of students. It was a highly competitive atmosphere. But when I look back on that and I see the trend since, it was certainly an anomaly, but something that I'm very proud of. After that, I went to Concordia. I studied political science, and once I got a political science degree, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be a political scientist, or I'm not going to go into politics. What am I going to do? Hindsight's 20/20, obviously. I went and I studied accounting at McGill at night. But before I studied accounting, I wanted to go into the music industry. So I was very involved with that. I was very interested and curious. I started a concert promotion company called Rock and Roll and Concerts. At the same time, I enrolled myself in Trebas Institute it was a 1-year course, and I earned the certificate in music business administration to learn about music business and so forth. And the most successful part of that stage of my life was I promoted a concert for Eric Burdon. Now, for those who don't know, Eric Burdon was in a very famous group called the Animals. He's inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He is a legend. So this was in 2005. So there's one particular story that I'd like to share with you from that, which it was not a defining moment in my life, but it was something that I'll never forget, because I don't think I'll be in a situation like that again. So after the concert, I gave backstage passes. There were specific backstage passes that I made for everybody. And it was very very flamboyant, the pass, and I gave clear instructions to the security team there that if anybody does not have a pass, they can't get in. This was a tremendous success. There were like 2,500 people there, and it was a packed house. And I'm looking from a distance. This is once I'm past the upstairs backstage, and I see that there's a man without any pass. I'm looking at him. He's the only one. It's very blatant, just black everywhere, but there's no pass. And I go to the head of security, like, where's his pass? And he's like, he's wearing it. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, he's wearing it on his back. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's wearing his pass on his back. So I go around. I'm looking from, like, I didn't want to go up to him because I didn't know who he was, and then I understood what the head of security was saying. He had a Hell's Angels patch on his back, so obviously nobody was going to ask him to put on a backstage pass. A few minutes later, I found myself sitting in a room with Eric Burden and Hell's Angels member, who I had no idea who he was, and this man's girlfriend. And I just kept on thinking, like, let me get out of here without any scars. I don't want any problems. Let's just move on. So anyways, it was a very peaceful night, but it wasn't something that I ever envisioned myself being in a room with a Hells Angels member and a rock and roll legend. Around that part of my life, I spent my summers for 3 summers, from 19 to 21. I did the concert promotions around when I was 19, 20. When I was 19 to 21, I spent my summers in between university. University have like 4-month summers. So I spent them in Ocean City, Maryland. There was about a dozen of us that went down, and we spent our time on the beach. But it wasn't just vacation. It was work. You work on the boardwalk. That was, I would say, a pivotal point in my life where I learned what work is. And it really developed my skills for a work ethic. The first summer I went down, so my friends went down a year before, and then they said, you got to come, it's great. We were about a dozen guys from the city. So I went down. They all had jobs and a place to stay. I had nothing. I drove down, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll take a few days, and if I can find a job and a place to stay, I'll stay. I was very fortunate. Within the next day, I found a job and I found a place to stay. The job I found was at a place called T-Shirt Factory, and I stayed at a place called the Atlantic Hotel. In fact, the Atlantic Hotel, they asked me to start working for them also. So for a good part of that first summer, I was working 2 jobs. I was working about 96 hours a week. So I was working 6 days a week. You're talking about a 12-hour shift. And then I would come home for a few hours, and twice a night, I was like the desk clerk at the hotel. And I honestly don't know how I did it. I think I had like 4 hours of sleep a night, but that was really a place where you learned what work is. So the T-shirt store that I worked for, it turns out the owner was a Jew from New York, and he was a great guy. He owned about 10 stores specifically in Ocean City. His largest competitor was actually his brother-in-law, who, for whatever reason, they didn't get along, didn't speak to. But that was really my first real job, and I learned what work is. I showed up to work 10 minutes early every single day. I earned an extra hour a week because of that. My boss didn't really notice that, but he just saw that I showed up 10 minutes early, and he was like, okay, he's a good worker. Whenever I took on a job, I really treated it as if it was my own. And I think that's part of my success for anything that I've taken. I've really owned it. It was never really a job for me. One story I'd like to share specifically from that. About the second summer, I was relocated. I was a very good salesman, and you're selling T-shirts, right? It's if anybody's ever been to a boardwalk, whatever, you're selling T-shirts and souvenirs and so forth. And I was a very good salesman. So the next summer, the owner relocated me to the busiest store. Just to give you an idea of how busy this store is, the rent on that store for 1 month was $250,000 US. You're talking about Ocean City, Maryland, which probably has a population of about 8,000 people, but in the height of season, which is 4th of July, you could have 1 million people come for that one day. One day, a few weeks into that summer, the owner, the boss, wanted I don't know what happened, but he wanted the bathroom cleaned every day, and each day it had to be a new employee taking a turn cleaning that bathroom. So I'm like, okay, great, fine. Everybody shares the bathroom. Everybody should clean it up, no problem. So I'm looking at the schedule and I see there's no manager on this rotation to clean the bathroom. So I bring it up to the manager. I'm like, you don't use the bathroom? I'm like, what's going on? The owner said clearly that everybody's got to take a turn cleaning. He's like, yeah, but you know what? We have other things to do. We're not going to do that. I said, okay, if that's the attitude that you're going to take, then I quit. I want nothing to do with this job if that's the way you are. So I quit, and but 2 days later I found a new job, and then a day after that, I get called into a meeting with all the bosses. There were partners, and he asked me what happened. I said the story, and he's like, okay, you know what, leave it with me. And I find out the next day that the owner went to that manager, fired that manager, and rehired me. And the following summer, I ended up as the manager of that busy store. Like I said before, my time in Ocean City was a defining experience for me. I worked like a horse. There was one time I showed up for work, and I was like, I'm exhausted. I can't even stand. And it wasn't because I was partying all night, but you know, parties did happen. But I just felt very weak, and I pushed through. I did what I had to do, and I pushed through. I found out months later, because when I came back to Montreal, I had to take a blood test, that at the time I had mono. And that's how dedicated I was. When I was sick like a dog with mono, I didn't care. I showed up for work, and I pushed through. The 4th of July morning, I was supposed to open up the store at 6 o'clock, and I was up. I was like, you know what the heck? It's 5:30. I'll go in and we'll start. And just because I went in that extra half hour, I think the store made an extra $500 or $600. I went in by myself, and that day that store earned a record. And this is going back almost 20 years. That store earned a record in a single day for $17,000. And the owners were incredibly happy with me. And when I left, they said, okay, we're going to give you $2 for every hour that you've ever worked for us. And it was like a farewell. And in fact, when I came back here, they're like, okay, why don't we finance you to open up a store in Montreal, and you'll set something up in old Montreal or something. It never worked out. But I really, whenever I talk to people about a job or something, I really want to highlight the fact that any job, no matter how old you are, even if it's a trivial job, a meaningless job, if you work your butt off for that job, it's not that you're working your butt off for the person, you are, but really you're developing a unique skill set for you to utilize much later on. And if it wasn't for my summers in Ocean City, I really wouldn't understand what work is. When I studied accounting, I was working during the day and I was studying at night. And during the campaign, everyone's asking me like, how can you manage, a family, 6 children, you have a full-time practice and so forth. Where do you have the time for this? And the truth is, I have been building myself up for this since I was young. Like I believe that there is no limit that one can take. If you're, I'm of the mentality that if you have too much on your plate, don't remove from your plate, get a bigger plate. So after I studied and earned my degree, right away I wanted to learn more, because I was of the thought that you're only going to be as good as the last tax return that you do if you don't push yourself forward. So I enrolled in a course to get another designation called Trust and Estate Practitioner. It's TEP. After that, I enrolled in a 3-year in-depth tax course with CPA Canada. And right after I finished that course, CPA Canada asked me to start teaching that course. And so I was teaching for CPA Canada and CPA Quebec. And just to give you an idea of who you're teaching to, you're not teaching to students who are learning to become accountants. It was a specific tax course for young professionals, lawyers and accountants who are already working in tax field and want to bring it to the next level. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I do only have so many hours in the day. So when I won the election, I resigned from teaching. I no longer teach tax. I'm reallocating my time to the town of Hampstead. And when I'm not working for the town of Hampstead, I have my own public accounting practice. Very happy to say that today I'm serving over 200 corporate clients, and I specialize in tax and general assurance services. And I'm very grateful to be at a point now where I can be selective with who I'm working with. When I was first starting out, I started my own practice at 33 years old. And same way with anybody who's starting a business, you would take any business you can get and you just build on that. And that's the way I was. And I built it up pretty quickly. And thank God now I'm at a point where you can work on terms that are amenable to both parties. That's pretty much my story up until now. Like I said, I'm only 37. I only have so many chapters, and I'm looking forward to filling in the rest. And I would love to field any questions that anybody has right now.
Thank you, Jeremy. Excellent. There's the chat area. If anybody wants to type in a question, or maybe we can be a little bit less formal. If anybody wants to just maybe put their hand up and you can ask the question directly. Just remember to unmute yourself before you do that. Are there any questions, any comments? Anyone who want to throw raw tomatoes? No. I don't see anything. Oh, wait, here, okay. Elon, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
I know your children are very young. Where are they going to school?
My children go to Akiva, and I'm very happy to say that every morning I bring them to school.
You still do that?
I still do that. I mean, it's convenient that they go to school 2 blocks away from where I work, but I still do it, and it's a very enjoyable part of my morning.
Nice.
I see questions here. Okay, it seems more like a political question. Seeing that some COVID restrictions are being lifted, do you foresee some summer concerts with certain quote, social distancing, unquote, being brought back in Hampstead Park. They were extremely successful pre-pandemic and created a camaraderie between the various neighboring cities. Best regards, Saba Irving Itman.
Okay.
So-
I was never too familiar with the Concert in the Park series. I have absolutely no objections to doing them or bringing them back if that's what people want. You know, when I was campaigning, a big part of my message was, let's listen to the residents and let's do what people want. And if that's what people want, that's what we're going to do.
Well, I might just add to this. We've actually put it into the budget for this year, so we have a more restricted than the previous one, but we do have a concert series budget. So if we have the ability to do it, we will be doing it. And then there was another question, trees. If you want them removed, what is the criteria? Is the old criteria applicable to silver maples? That's a really particular question.
I'm not sure I have the answer for that right now. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert.
Actually, that was a pre-submitted question from before. I didn't see the other ones. I figured they would ask you questions about what's involved with trees. But yeah, I don't think you need to answer that one. We're not going to hold you to the recording for this.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? No. In that case, I will thank Jeremy for being, well, actually, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to thank Jeremy or if Rabbi, I think I'm supposed to pass it on to Rabbi Whitman. Oh, no, wait, there's another question. Sorry. It's Bernie Malinoff, past president of the ADATH. Thank you, Jeremy, for such an amazing story and sharing your life story. Question, how did your family feel when you brought up the idea of running for mayor?
That's a great it's a great question. So when I met with Bill Steinberg for the very first time, I had a meeting with him, and I didn't like the way that the meeting went or concluded. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but it didn't sit well with me. And right away, I went home and I was speaking with my wife, and I was like, I got to run for mayor. Like, and that was the immediate reaction that I had. And my wife, knowing me and my character, and she knows that I wasn't saying it to make a joke or something. She was completely supportive, 100%. She was on board totally. My children, who I don't think they really understand at the time what it was, but they were like, yeah, okay, it's good. But one time I'm walking to synagogue with, I think it was Simchas Torah, and we're walking to synagogue with my children, and my son at the time he was 4 years old. He says, Dad, why do you want to be mayor? Don't you want to be our dad anymore? And he didn't understand that, like it's not just I'm leaving you and that's it. So I think he got that concept from a TV show that he was watching, and the mayor didn't have any children, and it was a bit of a funny time, but yeah, everyone else was totally on board.
Excellent. There's a couple of comments, not necessarily questions. Mary Birch says, thank you so much for sharing. Ms. Sushat says, looking forward to liaison with Kutsi and Luke, RE facilities such as library, swimming pool, etc. Thank you in advance for sharing your story and aspirations. And I'm just looking here to see if there are any more hands that are up. I don't see any. I saw one before, but it seems to have been down. Elliot had his hand up before. Do you still want to make a comment or question?
I was going to ask about the next blood drive. I know that always seems to happen in the summer. when I'm not around. And I know it's very important to Michael Goldwax, and it's important to me. And I've missed a few of them. So I know that we were once involved with a concert in the park, which was keyed in with a blood drive. But if they do that a little later in the season, might be more people around to contribute, specifically for the blood drive.
I don't know exactly when the next one is. I do know, like you said before, it's a very personal and important item to Councillor Goldwax. And I will find out. And Elliot, I have your email address, so I will get back to you and let you know exactly when the next.
Wonderful. One. Nice to see you again.
You too. Thank you.
Great stories.
Thank you.
Excellent. I think I'll pass it on at this point to Rabbi Whitman.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack. Thank you for moderating this evening. Jeremy, thank you very, very much. It has been my pleasure. And I was so delighted when you first made the suggestion that we should study together. I look forward to it every week. And I am very impressed with your knowledge and with your insights. So that Thursday morning slot is something that I really look forward to. It has been a pleasure to hear about your upbringing, your family, your experiences, all of those things that have led you to the point where you are. I really love the lesson that you learned from your grandfather, that you have to take a stance on what you think is right. And that should be the motivation for all kinds of leadership. And we're very fortunate that that is your motivation. I want to express personally, and from my family, and also on behalf of Adath, the tremendous privilege that it is to live in Hampstead. Maybe if you grow up here and you live here your whole life, maybe you take it for granted. This is a unique place, and it has a warmth to it. It has a responsiveness to it, and it has a level of accommodation of its residents that is rare. And I feel personally, my family feels personally, and certainly we at Adath just feel we're in a good place. All of the different elements of the leadership, the councilors, the mayor, the public security, the public works, all of the elements, the people that work in for the town that we get to work with in programming. It is a delight and it's a privilege. And Jeremy, you set the tone, and I think I sense a really good atmosphere around Hampstead today. And I want to wish you success and all of the elements that go into making this town the great, great, wonderful, and supportive town that it is. May you all be successful. And we thank you very much for participating at Adath tonight. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.